All right, let's get into a story that is just truly wild. Picture it. It's the mid-1970s, and the world is in a total panic. The oil crisis is hitting hard. I mean, gas lines are stretching for miles, prices are going through the roof. And right in the middle of all this chaos, this one guy from a small town in Ohio says, "Hey, I've got the answer."
His name was Stanley Meyer, and his claim, well, it was so bold it sounded like something straight out of science fiction. He wasn't just talking about, a slightly more efficient engine. No, he was talking about ending our reliance on oil. Period. Forever. By using the one thing we have more of than anything else on the planet, water. And this, right here, is where the story really kicks off. It's a story about a revolutionary technology, a promise to completely rewrite the rules of energy. But it all comes to a screeching halt in a Cracker Barrel parking lot, of all places, with a man collapsing and screaming that he'd been poisoned. So what was this water-powered dream exactly? Let's break down the invention that made Stanley Meyer one of the most famous and, as some people believe, one of the most dangerous inventors in America. And look, this wasn't just some theory scribbled on a napkin. Meyer had what he claimed was real, tangible proof. He built this dune buggy and said he drove it all over the country, powered by nothing more than plain old tap water. He was all over the news, doing demonstrations for anyone and everyone who would watch.
Okay, so the basic science here? It isn't actually new. We've known for over 100 years that you can use electricity to split water into its basic parts, hydrogen and oxygen. That process is called electrolysis. You can then take that hydrogen and burn it for energy. Sounds pretty simple, right?
Well, here's the catch. The problem with standard electrolysis is that it's kind of a losing game. It always takes more energy to split the water than you can ever get back from burning the hydrogen. That's just a fundamental law of physics. But Meyer claimed he found a loophole, a shortcut. He said his water fuel cell didn't use brute force. Instead, he claimed he'd found a special resonant frequency, kind of like an opera singer hitting that one perfect note that can shatter a wine glass. He said he could do that to water molecules, vibrate them so intensely they would just fall apart, releasing huge amounts of energy with very little electricity needed. And the result of this supposed breakthrough? An absolutely incredible claim. His dune buggy could get 100 miles per gallon of water, a number that would totally upend, well, the entire global economy. Naturally, this got a lot of attention. And we're not just talking about car enthusiasts. We're talking serious interest from places like the Pentagon and the British Admiralty. Meyer was apparently offered billions of dollars for his patents, but he turned it all down. He said over and over again he didn't want his technology to be bought and buried by corporations or weaponized. He insisted that this tech was meant for the people. And it was right at this peak, right when he was supposedly finalizing a major deal to bring the water car to the masses, that the story takes its darkest turn. So picture this. The date is March 21st, 1998. Stanley Meyer and his brother are at a dinner meeting with two potential investors from Belgium. Everything seems to be going just fine. Meyer takes a sip of his cranberry juice, and then the unthinkable happens. He violently clutches his neck, gasps that something is terribly wrong, and stumbles out into the parking lot where he just collapses. According to his brother Stephen, who was right there with him, Stanley's very last words as he lay dying in that parking lot were, "They poisoned me." But the official investigation, it came to a very different conclusion. The coroner ruled his death was from natural causes, a cerebral aneurysm. End of story. Except, it wasn't. In the weeks that followed, his supporters claimed that his lab was completely ransacked and that his most crucial equipment, including the water-powered dune buggy itself, had just vanished. So, on one hand, we have what looks like a classic conspiracy, right? A brilliant inventor, a world-changing technology, and a very, very suspicious death. But there's another side to this story, a big one. What if the entire thing was built on a lie? Because while the story of his death is unbelievably dramatic, it often glosses over a really crucial event from 2 years earlier, an event that didn't happen in a parking lot, but in a courtroom. So, back in 1996, Meyer was actually sued by his own investors. The court brought in an expert witness, a university professor, to examine the water fuel cell. And his finding? No magic resonance, no revolutionary tech. The expert testified that it was just a conventional, pretty inefficient electrolysis device. The court agreed, finding Meyer guilty of gross and egregious fraud and ordering him to pay back his investors. And this gets to the absolute core of the problem from a scientific point of view. Meyer's claims seem to violate a fundamental law of the universe. It's called the Second Law of Thermodynamics. And it basically says there's no free lunch. You cannot get more energy out of a closed system than you put into it. It's why perpetual motion machines are impossible. And if Meyer's cell worked the way he said it did, that's exactly what it would have been.
So this leaves us with two completely different versions of Stanley Meyer. And the big question for us, looking back at all this, is which one is the truth?
So which was he? Was he a visionary genius, a martyr for free energy who was silenced by a conspiracy to protect big oil? Or was he a fraud? A man who, maybe with good intentions at first, just got in way over his head, made a claim he couldn't back up, and was ultimately exposed.
But see, even if you lean towards the fraud explanation, there are still these nagging questions. If it was just some simple scam, why on earth was the Pentagon interested at all? Why was the timing of his death so convenient, right as he was meeting with new investors? And maybe strangest of all, why are there still communities of people online right now, today, convinced he was right and desperately trying to replicate his work?
In the end, there's no easy answer. The evidence that he committed fraud is strong, but the circumstances of his death are just suspicious enough to keep the conspiracy alive. And I guess until the day someone can actually fill up their car with a garden hose and drive off, the story of Stanley Meyer will always make us wonder, what if he was right?